This is the thing dreams are made of, man.
I've never been in a Twitter space before. I can't even tell you how excited I am. It's am I still
Uh-oh. Oh, boy. John's first Twitter space. Let me see if there's something I can do. Well, there's Jay. Let's get you in there. You there, Jay?
Hey everybody.
What's up? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, man. How are you?
All right. Good. I'm good. Yeah, this is it's not showing me speaking, so I'm just going to assume everyone can hear me.
Yeah, it has John connecting.
Yeah, we had him and then we lost him. Yeah.
Hey, welcome to Spaces, baby. How's everybody doing?
Hey, I'm here too now. Can I tell you what
Hey,
happened?
there he is.
Hey, John.
All of a sudden, I ended up in a discussion about Ukraine, and I don't know. I don't
Oh.
know how it happened, but I'm assuming I just hit a wrong button.
First rule of Twitter Spaces: don't touch your phone.
Jay, can I tell
Yeah,
you something?
exactly.
I really am the worst when it comes to this thing. I want to welcome everybody. For God's sakes, I hope everybody watched the stock market episode. It was your Apple TV Plus there, but we're very honored. We got Dave Lauer, Jay Brown, the two ballers. You were the two ballers of the episode. I think it's fair to say that you guys, I don't know, you might have crushed it a little bit. You might have taken it to the hoop. Is taking it to the hoop an ape expression?
Uh, shoot or shoot.
To shoot and score. As everyone knows, Dave Lauer, CEO of Urban Finance, market structure consultant at Citadel. Jay Brown, self-taught. Jay Brown, is that true? Self-taught?
Yeah, I mean, self-taught with the breadcrumbs from all of these guys and all these guys and gals in this movement, man. Some of these people you're gonna see in these spaces tonight. We've taught each other and shared so much information. And we always say not as financial advice, but for the most part, it's giving each other breadcrumbs to go find the information. Do your own due diligence is what we love to say.
I felt like that was the thing that was the thing that I felt like so resonated with everybody was just that sense of, hey man, people helping people, lifting each other up to try and balance out some of the inequities and inequalities in a market structure and a system that is, man, oh man, is it stacked up against you cats. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way Jay put it on the episode,
Mhm.
you know, when he described just people coming together to protect each other,
Right.
it's an amazing and inspiring thing, and it's you know as I've engaged with the community, it's really been an incredible thing to witness retail investors want to understand more about this, recognize the unfairness and and the problems with it, and then want to change it. It's just been incredible.
Here's the thing that I find so interesting, and you guys can comment on this. I am not. I work off of intuition. I don't know a ton about this, the ins and outs, the specificity of it, all those rules. But when you talk to people who are the market makers or the insiders, there's a real sense that they roll their eyes at you, that they give you that, you poor son of a bitch, you just don't understand the complexity of it. When in reality, they've created the complexity of it to make it so that you can't understand it, so that you can't permeate it, so that you can't get into it. It's designed that way. And when you speak to them with intuition, they give you shit like mind your business, mind your P's and Q's.
Yeah, especially with the jargon, you know, like there are so many different words and terms, and it's all nuanced. And if you don't get it perfectly right, they'll just rip into you. You know, Flash Boys really showed a lot of that. Like, yeah, when Flash Boys came out, there were some issues with it, but it was really speaking to a fundamental conflict of interest in markets,
Right.
and no one wanted to deal with it, so they just dismissed it because he got, you know, a few terms wrong and a few facts wrong, and it was a real shame.
Well, that's my favorite thing about it is when we start talking about it, and the pushback always comes with like, now, wait a second. It is the market functions as the way it should. They are incredibly free flowing and the price discovery, and you're like, but isn't it crooked, and isn't all the information like 2 weeks old? And they're like, oh yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's all fucking old.
Hey,
It's all
the funny part about it though, John, that's really made it interesting and fun for me
Mhm.
is that I've been in IT for 22 years, and it's still a bunch of acronyms I don't know. But if you
right.
put me in the room, I can explain it. I mean, they can say everything they want, but what makes us different, and what I tell people all the time, and we talk about, is that we live an everyday life. So if you give us, you know, different scenarios, we make it work. But once we
Right.
start getting the information to learn the way that they do business and the way that the language is set up to
Mhm.
learn the ins and out of it, we take our regular life and mix it in with their language. I feel like we almost have an advantage at this point because we live an everyday life. We know what it's like to pick and choose,
Right.
to go to the store instead of buying 6 lemons for $1.50 each. We just buy one.
And Jay, there's no question. We threw up that little graphic about we threw up the graphic about the complexity of the market, and they would like you to believe that that's necessary, that
Right.
complexity and that volatility. Hey, man, that's necessary. Those are market forces. It couldn't be more, uh, you know, different than that. But I'm going to bring in. We got a couple of more guys coming into the space here. We got the Mulligan twins. This is
Yeah,
they did a
Yeah.
documentary film, Apes Together Strong. I think Dave, you know them.
I
Here's what I'm
do.
going to say
They're
about
great guys.
the Mulligan twins. Are they in here?
They are. Yeah, here. Let me see if I can invite. Yep, I got them. I've invited them to speak. They
All right.
even came all the way up to Canada to talk to me. So I appreciate them even more.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
to
They
do
came
a
to
border
Louisiana.
crossing like that in this
Yeah,
day and age, very, very difficult.
that's right.
It must have been a terrible journey of discovery. Here's what I'm going to say about the Mulligan twins. They are, because in the world we know that the Winklevoss twins also exist. I believe the Mulligan twins have been sent here to offset them. The Mulligan twins are here as the twin antidote to Winklevosses. Winklevosses? Is it Winkle or Winkle?
It's Winkleby, I believe, is the plural.
Oh, see,
Oh
I didn't
my
realize that.
goodness.
But but here's the thing: I don't speak German, so I don't. You, Dave, you may be very correct, but I don't. I don't speak that. But Mulligan, I speak. Who here hasn't requested and gotten a Mulligan? So let me see if the Mulligans are here. Are Mulligans?
Hark. John, you man of the people, you.
You men of the people. You. Uh, uh, Tell me, you did this documentary about the ape movement, about Together Strong. What got you guys involved in that? Why did you? What piqued your interest in this movement? I'll tell you what piqued mine. I was just the idea that these Davids were going up against a Goliath that really was just interested in their dumb money, and that they figured out a way to outsmart it. Man, I just fucking love that kind of stuff. So what got you guys into it?
Hell yeah. I mean, it's yeah. So first off, we're still in production, right? We're in post now, so
Okay.
within the next few months we'll have updates on that. But what got us started is we were bought into all this in January before it ran up, and like so many people,
Hmm.
we're sitting at home, isolated, and struggling to make ends meet. Our heads are in the grind, and finally, like so many millions, there was this pandemic, right? And we had a chance to kind of take a step back from the grind
Hmm.
and learn about things like financial literacy, like markets. All the while, this short squeeze is starting to pop on with GameStop. So we
Hmm.
jumped in like a lot of people, and when Robinhood took away the buy button and those other payment forwarder for brokers, we saw a wrong had been done, and being filmmakers, decided how can we help? We can pick up our cameras, start documenting and talking to the actual people that have been affected. Just like one of our things about our film is we're taking it from an ape perspective, right? We're telling
Right.
the story from the inside out. So seeing that wrong happen is what really made us pick up the cameras and
Now, is your
get
is your
going.
sense of it that there was a panic within the markets that someone had kind of used a decoder ring on them, for lack of a better metaphor, and figured out like, oh shit, we can use the methods that they've been using to obfuscate and make money outside of this. Is we can use that against them.
Well, there was a moment where all of a sudden you have these hedge funds that are so extremely over leveraged and put themselves in such a terrible position, and there's this small handful of folks that look and said, "What the fuck is that?" And then all started kind of saying the same thing to each other, and everyone started looking at it, and we were the ones that decided to say, "Hey, this is a good bet that we can make."
It makes sense, right? Like, because even as early as September on Reddit, you have a couple users taking a look at the short interest in GameStop, seeing how extreme it was. But then even back then, talking about using options, to force hedging to happen so market makers would have to buy more shares. Dave Lauer definitely got to dig into the mechanics of that. But I mean, as early as then, you had some pretty sophisticated people following this play, making it happen, and of course, many others joined in and ended up learning all of that later.
Yeah, the educating each other is such a massive part of this. It's kind of a dorky example of what I mean, but the Johannes Gutenberg made the movable type printing press. Suddenly, the Bible, instead of only being in Latin for the elite to understand, was in vernacular. Everyone could understand it. Same thing's kind of happening here, only we kind of have this financial Latin that wasn't meant for us commoners until a few people decided to start talking to each other, and now we have our own sort of movable type printing press. Only it's memes and dick jokes, and it's a lot more fun to read.
From now on, I'm going to refer to you as the Gutenberg twins. You are the Gutenberg twins, and you have created and documented the language of the apes. What I find so interesting, and maybe Dave can also speak to this, is the resentment. There's a great deal of resentment that somehow the apes had come in and didn't understand the actual rules of the road, when in essence, all you were doing was applying the principles that I mean, who in their right mind, just as an intuitive person, would think you're allowed to take options that are more than the value of the entire company to bet against that company? And you don't have to tell anybody. There's the idea that the regulators, imagine going into a casino and you're the guy in there who's like, these dice are loaded and that motherfucker is counting cards and that roulette wheel doesn't anybody have their eye on this shit?
Well, this is nothing new for a lot of people that are who would be retail investors. The resentment from the upper classes to the lower classes is why our systems are so obfuscated and intentionally difficult to understand.
Right.
The dice have always been loaded. This is since our country was founded. So, it's nothing new, and it doesn't surprise me even the least bit. But that doesn't mean I'm any less pissed off because it's normal.
I mean, what's so unique about this situation is, like, even back with Occupy Wall Street, you have everyone can say, "Oh, Wall Street's bad," and it's this general, like, everyone's got that sense, right? But now we've discovered these very few pretty complicated financial mechanisms that have become this really sharp spear tip with a massive amount of weight behind it. We're talking about our complicated markets that are made more complicated by things like internalization, payment for order flow, rebates from stock exchanges. Like, we have so many places where we can exchange, many of them dark, without transparent, open markets full of healthy competition.
That's
capitalism doesn't work right.
That's right. And here's what I love about it. The idea is, so then you get a company like Robinhood who comes in, and the whole ethos is obviously we're for the little guy. We're helping the little guy come in and obviously rob from the rich and give to the poor. Which, by the way, I don't know if you guys know the original Robin Hood Men in Tights, Cary Elwes. He jumped in he did yeoman's work to jump in and try and explain to Robin Hood that the whole Robin Hood ethos is you steal from the rich and you give to the poor. It really, I don't believe Robin Hood in Nottingham Forest had payment for order flow on lupins or whatever it was that was the currency at the time. But actually, Cary is also, I think he's in our Twitter space. Cary, are you here?
Hello, Cary.
Oh man,
Cary, he's still so handsome.
I know.
Yeah, man, he still look like he's ready to jump in them tights and go put part 2.
Can I tell you something, Jay? And I was kind of hoping you would bring this up. I'm wearing those tights right now.
Hey, you know me, man. You got everybody in the world.
Mental image we need.
You got everybody in the world want to hug me, so I can believe that.
Exactly. That's what we're here for, is to hug you. Cary, are you there?
I'm here. Hi. Let me step outside.
That's the voice.
I'm in a hotel right now, and there's a guy playing Spanish guitar, so I don't want to interrupt your session with that. Hi, how you doing?
We're doing very well, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Are you an ape? Are you an investor? Are you a young man who involves himself in this endeavor?
I do not. I have a fear of Wall Street. After watching The Wolf of Wall Street, that was the final straw for me. I I didn't think much of investing on Wall Street, really, and even less after watching that movie, and certainly after watching what happened with Robin Hood, and it definitely made me fearful of doing that. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, we're very appreciative to have you come out there and throw. I mean, really, the whole credibility of the Robin Hood brand and name onto our episode.
All right.
Uh,
Thank you.
and it worked beautifully. So we thank you very much. And I don't want to keep. I know you're in a hotel sipping on a Cuba Libre and listening to Spanish guitar. So I'm gonna let you Robin Hood on out of there. But thank you for joining us, my friend.
My pleasure. It's always a joy, and I'm learning so much already just listening to this show.
Oh, these guys don't fuck around. You know who kind of was on the episode that was a guy that I think really has a ton of experience on that. It's Danny Moses. He's got his own podcast on The Big Short.
Oh yeah.
Danny, are you in here? Do they have to tell Danny to come in?
Yeah, I think Danny is here. John, I
he
got a
is.
question for you.
There we
real
go.
quick.
You should be in.
Hey, John, you got a quick second? Got a quick
Yep.
question for you.
Yep. Hey, Danny, how are you? Jay's about to ask me a question, and then we're gonna go to you, my friend.
All right. I'm gonna ask you a quick question. Let me ask you a question. Why
Sagittarius. All right, let's move on. Danny, no, go ahead, Jay.
Why the market? Why this episode? Why this fight? Why getting this with us? Why expose this stuff for us?
Because Jay, this is indicative of how a lot of the mechanisms of the country are siloed off from the people that they purport to help. The thing about Wall Street that gets my dander up is this idea that it is representative of a free market capitalist system, that this is somehow the symbol of all the monetary might and the capitalist might of this country. And then when you burrow down into it, to see the inequities, the inequalities, but also the rigging, the idea that, there's teachers out there working their fucking asses off and getting their pension funds invested with hedge funds that have a backroom casino where they're charging them 20%. Listen, man, I don't care about wealth. I'm rich. I'm a rich man, but I don't like the systemic inequality built into the system that drives that inequality further and further away. What I really don't like about this system is they lure in what they think is dumb money to finance their adventures. And when I saw you guys stand up to that in a profound way, it really affected me, really moved me. And I thought you guys uncovered something corrosive at the heart of our system. And the thing that I learned was the parts that I thought were so unequal and bizarre were actually the best functioning parts of our market. That there was this whole other room of EFTs and derivatives and other shit and high leveraged, bets that just reminds me of fucking Vegas.
You hit it on the head, man. You hit it on the head.
It's even worse, right? When they tell you that they're doing God's work.
That's the crazy part. But Danny, listen, you're here. You're a guy that understands these cats. Talk to me about, you talked a little bit about the institutional investors and how they were viewing Robinhood and the apes and gamification and the kind of things that in your mind, we're moving away from fundamentals. Do you think that this market does fundamentals, or is there like a 15 to 20% VIG in the stock market that's got nothing to do with fundamentals? That's just like the operators of it are cleaning up.
I mean, this stuff's been around, right, for years, pre-Robinhood, right? Short
Right.
squeezes, runaway stocks. You know, stocks go up sometimes just as much as they go down, but people get a lot more upset on the retail side when stocks go down. But they should be asking questions both ways. So, I mean, this stuff's been going on, you know, for years now. So I'm glad that, like I said on the show, the retail community is in here to talk about things that we've been trying to fix for years. I mean, there's people obviously I see lined up on this Twitter Spaces that have done great work. Dave's done great work to get to the underbelly of all of this, because Robinhood, let me just back up. Robinhood, when it came out and it was coming out as a service, even prior to it going public, we were kind of laughing at it on the institutional side. We knew what they have no idea how to be a broker, right? Look at all the fines that they got. They've paid more fines per trade than anyone in the history of Wall Street, right? There was a reason for that. They were just a conduit. They were a platform. And maybe they cared about their retail customer, but I don't think they did. So people were already onto them as far as what they were going to do. And then they allowed people to come in and trade like this. But I'll tell you one thing, people at Melvin Capital, other people did not respect the size of the retail community and were completely caught off guard when all this stuff went down during COVID. And again, to answer your question, John, like fundamentals, I'm a big believer in bottom up work, right, on companies and not over trading them. At the end of the day, stocks will go where they're supposed to go, whether that's to 0 or to 1,000, whatever it's going to be. So in between, though, I think people are over trading, right? I think that's the one thing that's gone on here, and that's exactly what Robinhood wanted, right? So,
but isn't that exactly what everybody wanted, Danny? Because that's, you know, the thing that struck me about the market is, I mean, people can complain about Robinhood, but high frequency trading, the big market makers, the people that move their microwave towers next to the servers, they make their money on volatility. I mean, you made a really good point, which is, you know, everybody's mad when the market goes down in the retail community, but when it's going up, everybody's excited. But there are an awful lot of institutional investors out there that it goes up, great. It goes down, okay, not as great, but they still make their fucking money because they make it on volatility and volume. And, you know, hasn't that been built into the guys that control the market, these, you know, larger firms and larger banks? Haven't they always had an institutional market that leaves retail guys holding the bag when, you know, don't they privatize their gains and socialize their losses to a large extent?
I mean, they definitely set up the game, if you want to call it that, to a degree for their benefit, right? The rules are set up for professional traders. They're not set up for retail traders, right? So you're right. From the very beginning, it's set up that way. And they want to manage everybody's money, right? BlackRock wants you just to go into an ETF and let them manage you in these passive funds,
That's right?
Which is fine. They're going to clip a fee for it and all that. But let me just say that. So, you know, Big Short comes out, March 2010. On May 6th was the flash crash. I forgot about everything that happened on the Big Short at that point and realized, yes, that was already done, right? Because the market, we'd already crashed over here and it was still going on in Europe. But that to me was a much bigger issue, which is when I met Dave and Brad Katsuyama and these guys from IEX. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, you have no idea how bad it is. So they took me down into the jungle. And it's a deep jungle down there, John. I think you got it right. And I think, you did a good job trying to, uncover some of the issues there for sure.
Well, that's what I loved about the Ape, to be honest with you, is, and I was trying to bring this up to the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, which was, here you have this incredible tool. What the Apes did is they provided a service. They uncovered, and look, maybe it was corruption that they already knew existed down there and didn't want to uncover, but they shined a light in some of the creakier, darker, cobwebbed corners of this, of the casino. And seems like if you can have somebody do that, it makes it easier to give you markets that play more by the fundamentals and more by the rules, and that rather than dismissing the apes as unsophisticated or dumb money, they could have formed common cause with them and found a way to, because look, those guys are outgunned at the SEC. Like, dude, their fucking coffee room has apparently somebody started a GoFundMe for buying the SEC coffee materials. I mean, that might be my favorite thing out of all of this.
I'm just disappointed. I'm glad you exposed Gensler a little bit, just put him on the spot and hammered him, because a year ago, or not even, he comes out and says, I'm number one. I'm going after payment for order flow. I'm going to make this market fair. Nothing has happened. I mean, when absolutely nothing has happened. And
Yeah.
Dave can talk to you till he's blue in the face. And that to me is just, you know, and again, I talked about it, Wall Street to K Street, right? That the Acela corridor, as they call it.
Right.
That's
you think
corrupt.
you think that's institutional capture? Because I've got to tell you from talking to him, I don't doubt his sincerity. I really don't. I think he's an institutional individual who maybe doesn't have the, you know, look, what you guys are bringing to it is a creativity and an agility and an energy that somebody who is steeped in that culture just may not understand.
Who was
Just
the guy?
may not, you know?
Who was the godfather of Frank Pantangeli? What, when his brother was in the back? Someone
Yes.
got Gensler's brother. They have him somewhere. I don't know where he is, but I'm telling you that is what's happened here. And I honestly, yes, he may not have the resources, but I think it's more than that. It's like, hold on a second. I'm going to get a lot of speaking engagements on Wall Street when I'm out of here, right? I could do a lot of things. I don't know, man. I'm pretty cynical on that
the
stuff.
Negative.
So.
That's the negative rub. The positive rub would be that when somebody is steeped in institutional thinking, they no longer possess the creativity to think outside of that structure. And if there was ever a time to have to think outside of the structure to clean up the fundamentals of these markets, it would be now.
Agreed.
Yeah,
All
you know, I
right,
think it's
look at
hard
us
though.
settling things.
Sorry, I just want to say, like, I agree with you that he is, I think he means well. I think he wants to. And I think that the SEC as an institution is not set up for that either. That's part of the problem, right? And
Right.
and we talked about this, John, that the SEC is 80% lawyers.
Right.
Right? You can't regulate an electronic, a complex system without data scientists and computer engineers and traders and insiders. And instead, we've got all of these
Right.
lawyers trying to figure it out, and it's tough.
But dude, isn't the problem there the similar thing with like cartels? Like, guess what? Drug money's just better money.
Yeah,
It's just better money, man.
of
And
course they go
you
right
can
through that
say like, yeah,
revolving
I want to
door.
be the sheriff.
You know it.
Hey, John, I got, I like to put analogies up.
Please,
It's like,
Jay, come on, bring it.
it's like, here it is. It's as simple as this. It's like the guy that operates the drawbridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
He sits there and the drawbridge is wide open for every ship to come through, but he never looks to see that he's backing up traffic all the way down. Here it is, us as retail investors want to get on the other side of this bridge, but it's too easy for him to allow all the ships to come through, and they just say, oh shit, they'll wait. They're not important. Don't worry about it. And what we've done is we've taken the drawbridge conductor hostage and said, God damn it, we're getting across this bridge.
Right.
And we're not going to stop because we got guys like Danny and David and Lisa and a bunch of other people that have been fighting this fight forever. And now they have backup, standing shoulder to shoulder with them, making our voices heard. Like, damn it, it's our money that you're doing this with. No more 0.3% savings account. We're in the market getting 10% gains, 15% gains, investing in ourselves. And they don't like it because we don't need them anymore. A friend of mine
Right.
said they have to be right. And guess what? Comes to find out, in some situations, they're fucking wrong. That's just
And
it.
the other thing, Jay, that was interesting is the thing you got to wonder about the drawbridge is he's letting everybody in, but you think to yourself, is this, how political is he having to be when he's talking on camera? Because he knows those ships are keeping an eye on that drawbridge. And if he's too open about letting you guys go over, that's going to create a problem for him. And I'll tell you, this was an interesting point. I think we got Dennis Kelleher is here, who we had spoken to about the show. Dennis, are you here?
Love that guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if he's here. I know what happens is when you invite somebody into a Twitter space, it takes like a little bit for them to press the right buttons on their phone. And then
I get the buttons. How are you, John?
Oh, Dennis, thank goodness. Because when I tried to come in here, I ended up throwing at least 3 or 4 phones out the window. So, Dennis, you are the co-founder, president, CEO of Better Markets, which is, I think, what everybody's ultimate goal is here. I don't think anybody here is looking to end markets. We're just looking to make them better. So what was your sense of what Jay and Dave and Danny have been talking about, and your sense of Gary, knowing him as you do.
He's on mute again.
Oh, did he go on mute again?
No, he put it himself. I think he just needs to hit it up.
No, I don't know.
There he is.
Keeps going
There he
on
is.
and off. Look, first, I think it's a great show. It's a great public service to highlight in an understandable way a lot of the parts of the stock market that people can't see but are ripping them off. So great show, and David and the rest of the team all provided great insights, and I thought it was really well done. But a couple of important things to think about that, Better Markets is a public advocacy group. It's a nonprofit group in Washington, D.C., and we live at the agencies where we're a counterweight to Wall Street. So the problem is that Washington is captured by the money, power, might, and pixie dust of Wall Street, as Danny knows and he talked about. And the problem is that by the time, and John, you talked about this on the show, by the time you enter your first stock market order, the field is already rigged. The field is already unlevel because the rules are set in Washington, and then they're enforced by agencies like the SEC, which you saw firsthand, John, suffer from some debilitating constraints, shall we call them?
Yes.
And so the Army that took over the markets in January of 2020, 2020, and I'm sorry, 21, really need to take over Washington. And David's talked about this, Danny's talked about this, and you too, John. Until that Reddit rebellion gets to Washington and starts influencing the people who actually make the rules are already set. And by the time the rules are set and then they're enforced by the SEC, you can operate within those rules, but unless you change the rules, they're always going to be tilted against you.
Let me ask you a question, Dennis, because one of the things that happened when I was talking to Gary, and I was trying to figure out, and I liked him, and I actually did think he was sincere, but there was one moment where he said, I go, he said something about the laws, we're enforcing the laws, and I go, right, but who makes the laws? And he's like, Congress. And I was like, the lobbyists of the financial institutions? No, Congress and their talented aides. And I was like, come on, dude.
I know.
This. And what I was trying to figure out is, does he know this and he can't be impolitic? Or does he truly believe that influence, it's the thing I've always said is, the problem with poor people is they just have shitty lobbyists. Like these banks and these financial institutions are just crushing it.
Yeah, no,
but
look, Gary,
they must know that.
No, Gary well knows how the process works, and we all know how the process works. The rich and powerful in this country purchase politicians. They provide those and then that gets them access and influence. They literally provide those politicians with binders of draft laws and draft amendments.
Of course.
That those politicians then push like crazy. And I know your audience will be shocked to learn this, John. But do you know who the number one individual donor in last year was to the Republican Party? Could you think of what his name might be?
I'm going to go with Malala Yousafzai.
I can't believe you got it right. I can't believe it. I can't. That's amazing. Now, if you hold that name up to the light, it's actually Ken Griffin.
Get the fuck out.
I am not making that up. Ken Griffin is the number one contributor to the Republican Party and individual in 2021. And he's expected to spend multiples of, I think it was, I'll round up because who cares about big money, like $100 million in 2021 he wrote checks for.
Shit.
And Dennis, let's not forget the top donor to the owner of the ICE, his wife, for her Senate campaign.
Well, in fact, Kenny Boy jumped in January of last year to try and swing the Georgia races to the Republican senators.
That's right.
And why is that? And that's because that puts them at the center of writing our laws. And that's how it works a lot of the time and too much of the time. Not all of the time.
Right.
There's a lot of people like Sherrod Brown, Elizabeth Warren, Jack Reed. I could go down a long list of senators and congresspeople, Maxine Waters, who are in there fighting for not just apes in retail, but for people on Main Street, not the people on Wall Street. There are a lot of people who can't be bought. There's a lot of people working hard in the agencies across Washington, but
Right.
they are fighting against an army of lawyers, lobbyists, and incredibly rich and politically well-connected financiers who,
Right.
no shock, are lining their pockets, at the expense of everyone else.
Well,
And
let
it's
me
a
Dennis,
bring
lot of
in.
money.
Let me go right now and bring in one of our other fine panelists from the program. Matt Kors is here. He was in on the program, and he's going to be joining us now. And as he joins, hey Matt, and I'll let him press his buttons and figure out how to do all that. But let me ask you a question about Citadel and Ken Griffin. It was pretty clear when they wrote a memo about payment for order flow that they felt it was rife with conflict of interest and that it was not going to be a positive actor on these markets. What changed, or do they no longer believe that, or is it that they figured out how to exploit that?
Yeah, they started making money from it. They launched it as a business. I mean,
Right.
it's clear as day, right? And the same exact thing happened with Virtu. Virtu was against payment for order flow and against this system. And then they bought KCG, which was the other large wholesaler, and suddenly they flipped their views. You know, they did a 180. It's all about where the money's coming from, and
But
it's,
how
it
can the
couldn't be
heart
more obvious.
of what we consider to be, and I'm using their words, our free market capitalist system be so monopolistic?
Well,
You're
that's the
looking at,
problem,
if there's
right?
only two market makers, how the fuck is that capitalism?
That's the absurdity of it. It's like you feel like you're banging your head against a wall, and you make the argument. You're like, wait a second, we should just have open competition. More competition will bring better outcomes. And they try and take you down like you're a maniac or you're a communist. And you're like, wait, I'm making arguments that are capitalistic. I think competitive systems work better. And they're like, no, trust us. This is the best because we're just printing money off of it.
Well, it's crony capitalism. And
Yes,
one of the
sir.
ways to think about it, John, is Washington and regulators are largely in what I call the incumbent protection business. Incumbent businesses like the
Sure.
big banks on Wall Street and the HFT firms have a lot of money, and they spend that money to capture Washington. So if you want to break into that monopoly or oligopoly, anti-competitive, back-scratching business where, oh, by the way, a lot of these people go through the revolving door and then get their, I call it after the fact bribe payments. They either get them before the fact, before they go into the government, or after. Not
Right.
all of them, but a lot of them. But they're there to protect the incumbent businesses, whether it's the Virtus, the Citadels, the J.P. Morgan Chase, the Goldman Sachs, who flood the zone with lawyers, lobbyists, and politicians making calls. I mean, there was a hearing today with the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, and one of the Republican senators began by saying, look, I want to say I really appreciate your openness to me and always taking my call. And I was thinking, I'm sure he does.
Holy shit. You know what that tells you? It tells you that the only thing that has more of an incumbency advantage than political office is money.
Yeah.
Wealth incumbency has a stronger advantage than that. But let's bring in Matt. Matt, what's your community talking about in terms of this episode and how things are going in terms of kind of the strength of the apes and their aims and all those other things?
Hey, happy to be here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think overall it's kind of one of these like anti-narrative things from the start of it. We were always told, especially by mainstream media, that it was a flash in the pan, and for some reason, whatever reason that was, that apparently the quote unquote apes would leave and would become bored. And yet here we are, borderline 14 months later,
Right.
and we're actively having a space call with you, and we're getting more and more information out there to the masses. And in my, I guess, humble opinion, I think we're growing and growing and growing. And obviously, now that I've watched that particular episode multiple times, it's so interesting to me. I feel like each time I had a different emotional reaction to it. At first, like just obviously reliving the event, it was so cool to meet everyone in person. Second time, like very excited because I feel like our voice is being heard. And then the most recent time that I just watched it, oddly enough, I think I just had like pure anger. And I think the thing that would explain it the best was actually Ken Griffin's discussion of him sitting there and saying, "This is a cost to me."
Right.
It's so fucking
I do this out of the
intellectually
goodness of my
dishonest.
heart.
Yeah, it's so dishonest. And actually, that full interview, the other parts of it that he was talking, he's like, "Hey, man, it's just the SEC. You tell me what side of the road to drive on, and I'll drive on it." It's so incredibly like it's just a false argument. It's such
Right.
bullshit. He's making billions off of it. It
And
was
that brings
just
up the other
valued at
part
$22
about
billion.
this. So these systems have there's an immune system. The SEC is part of the immune system, but one of the other things that's part of the immune system are the financial news networks. Financial journalism has to be a robust part of the immune system for corruption in the markets. And it seems like they have very little interest in driving that. They're as captured as the rest of it.
Well,
Yeah.
and even worse, I mean, you look at the ads, their entire net worth and their existence depends upon the advertising they're getting from the biggest financial firms in the country. It's that simple. Same thing happens in Washington. You look at all these newsletters that everybody's reading in the big so-called media outlets, and now they sell sponsorships for all this. They sponsored by this financial firm and that financial firm.
Right.
These people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to basically indirectly buy the media that then cheerleads the financial industry. And John, I thought the piece that you did on CNBC was spectacular. It reminds me, remember after the Iraq War, there was this big internal investigation at a bunch of the newspaper places like the New York Times about how they could have been duped about the
Right.
weapons of mass destruction.
That's
What
right.
what was never really done was those same media outlets also cheered the financial industry before the 2008 crash. And
Absolutely.
and nobody stopped and said, "Gee, how did this crash come out of nowhere? How did all this happen? How did nobody know?" Well, it's because the mainstream media just parroted anything that was said to them, by and large, by
Right.
their sponsors.
And always very angry if you were to ever bring that up to them. But we got ourselves another member joining now. I'm gonna jump in and see if Trey is there. Trey Trades, can you unmute or press whatever Twitter button life thing?
Hey, John. And one quick question and one
Yes,
quick
sir.
point. And while we wait for Trey to come up,
Yeah.
what they do with this money is so disingenuous to the point to where at one point, us AMC holders, we put all of our share count into something called Say Technology to kind of count to get a share count, right? You know what? You
Right.
know what happened once we did all of that and we had our earnings meeting? They got bought out by Robinhood. So they can try to get an accurate count. Like they don't play fair. But the crazy part about it is that I think what's going to end up happening as a history person is we'll have to go back to that time of Theodore Roosevelt where they rail against these monopolists, and the people are actually in a position to do it with all of these allies like Dennis and Danny and everybody. We
Right.
have to understand that one company, one giant corporation, the latter cannot have the will of the people. Because the last time I checked, some of these Supreme Court justices have their associates write their papers. There's no way in hell you're going to tell me that you have a sitting congressman that writes a 700-page bill, like Dennis said. Somebody handed him
There's no look.
a
I've been a part of that process. When we first went down, and this has to do with the burn pits and the veterans. When we first went down there to get them to address the issue, we met with a coalition of veterans who were also congresspeople, and they were very sympathetic and they were very interested in it, but they were also very frank with us. And what they said was, "Look, man, we're up against it, and we're busy." And things are a little out of control. So if you guys don't mind, and it's what began the process of us putting those bills together, is get together with the veteran service organizations and get together with the interested parties, and could you guys write something up? And that's what we did. And that's for trying to accomplish something good. But I'll guarantee you that when people are trying to be nefarious and protect economic interests, they do it even more. Trey, are you here now?
Hey, John, how you doing?
Trey, let me say this. First of all, to have the name Trey Trades, and then ultimately end up in the business that you're in. I mean, what a fortunate coincidence.
You know, life works in crazy ways. That's right from the womb. My mom, she said, "Son, your name's gonna be Trey, middle name Trades, and you know the rest is just history." I don't know how that works,
Trey
but
Trades, and your last name is to the moon. So I think it works out very beautifully.
you know, I've actually got a cat named Titan, and I found him out on the streets. Funny story: the Mulligan brothers, they're coming out to film that documentary, and when they came out, we just found this Siamese cat, and I named him Titan just because I was like, that's a cool name.
Boom.
And
Done.
in translation, that means diamond moon, which is just kind of funny how that works out, you know.
So Trey, you're in your mind, you're thinking that the SEC is just not really going to matter in this. That they're just outgunned, and they're not going to be the sheriff that everybody needs.
Well, John, first off, got to say, watch the episode. Fantastic. I think the biggest takeaway for me is you can create all of these rules and regulations in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But none of it's going to matter unless there's enforcement. We've seen a million times, right? Citadel's got a million fines and rule breakings. You've got Robinhood that's broken a million rules. And if all you're getting is a pay to play, right? You're paying an ante at a blackjack table. These guys are just going to keep paying to play. So it ultimately comes down to, I think, politicians and actual enforcement. Either that or you beef up the SEC. I mean, the donations for the coffee, that kind of paints the whole picture. You know, they just don't have the tools to crack down on the way that I think is required.
But don't you guys think then that there has to be, because one of the things that I am sympathetic to is the complexity of the regulation, which, as we know, is written by the financial institutions themselves, makes it nearly impossible to enforce. Because the more complexity that you put in there, the more that you allow their lawyers space to run. So,
part of
in
it,
the old days
John,
of Glass-Steagall, right? In the old days of even the
Yeah.
Volcker rule, if we don't go back to something simple that clearly delineates, barriers between savings and loans, and barriers between hedge funds and pension accounts, or anti-monopolist regulation, but simple, they can't enforce them because they're so outgunned by legal teams. And somebody's
I
got to
think
fucking go to jail when they lie on purpose. Like, somebody's got to go to jail.
But it feels, yes, I agree with you, and they should be going to jail and not paying fines, and a lot of people agree with that, and some of these rules have been to enforce them, like best execution. One of the top enforcement people on that described it as trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. But then the other side of it is, even though they can't enforce and track some of these rules because of the complexity, when they do find problems and they find these brokers, that's all that happens, right? When was the last time that FINRA revoked the license of a major broker dealer, right? How many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, how many markets do you have to rig, and you still are in business? I find that to be disgusting. It's just complete moral hazard, as Danny
I'll
described
go
it.
one further. You've got Wells Fargo laundering money for drug cartels.
Yes.
They're
Yes,
laundering
they're
money
fixing markets. They're laundering money.
Right.
There's nothing they can do that puts them out of business.
Well,
I mean, that's just, it's they right now have, it's almost like they have money laundering departments. And even when it's discovered, all the government does is say, it would be nice if we could get a taste. And they give them a taste. And instead of giving that taste to bolster the sheriff's office, I don't know what the fuck they do with it. Where does the money go even on the fines?
But it goes into the Treasury. It doesn't even go to the SEC. It just goes to the government.
Well,
but that's the thing. It goes bonkers like that because we had an SEC lawyer come in and talk with us in the spaces, and we had another lawyer come in and talk with us in the spaces about RICO. And what we learned in that space is that they'll go after individuals, but they won't go after the corporation. It's like they'll take out one of the fighters, but they won't go after the Death Star. But and that in itself is crazy because at the same time, if all of these nefarious things are coming out of this place, why not get rid of that place? But don't slap them on the wrist and let them go open a family fund somewhere that's unregulated. Get them the hell out of here. Send somebody to jail for a long time.
But I do want to say that I think sending people to jail is very difficult and it causes paralysis. I think you can do something much worse to these people, which is take their money. I mean,
But
meaningful.
that is what they do. They just take a very
No,
small
they
proportion
actually
of it.
don't. The corporation pays the money, which is tax deductible and often covered by insurance companies, and the amount of money is tiny compared to their revenue. We put out a report at Better Markets on the Wall Street crime spree that showed that over 20 years they were the six biggest banks were fined over $200 billion, and they didn't care, and their crime spree is increasing. So what really has to happen is they've got to focus on executives and supervisors, and
Mhm.
they've got to meaningfully punish individual executives, supervisors, and their lawyers and gatekeepers in a meaningful way, which is personal fines. If they make money, take the money away, give
Right.
fines 5 times the money they made, borrow them from the industry, and really do it.
Right.
All the SEC does is goes after minnows while they watch the whales go by.
Yeah.
Hey,
Department
John,
does it
I
too.
agree.
But I think people worrying about putting people, I'm all for putting people in jail. But when you see what Goldman Sachs has done and JP Morgan Chase has done, JP Morgan Chase has pleaded guilty to 5 criminal charges in the last 8 years, 5, including helping Bernie Madoff, who could not have done his Ponzi scheme without JP Morgan Chase's help. And yet,
Bernie Madoff should have gone to jail just for what he did to my New York Mets. I mean,
well,
that's not right.
and
He shouldn't
JP
That
be
was
Morgan.
the
able to do
best
that
thing
to
he
the
did,
Mets.
John. That was the best thing he did as a Phillies fan.
Well, but actually, that was misleading because when Gary said to you, John, what
Yeah.
you said Martha Stewart, and he said Madoff went to jail. Well, that's a shame because that's actually a total falsehood. Madoff turned himself in; he was never caught. Whistleblowers went to the SEC for 16 years
Yeah. Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to get the SEC to go after Madoff. I put this in a
I talked to the guy who used to write letters to the SEC about Madoff. He used to send them letters. He was just some guy,
oh yeah.
and he would write letters to the SEC
No,
like, "Hey, man,
he
this is
met with
crazy."
them repeatedly and gave them a mountain of evidence, and the SEC laughed at him.
Yeah.
And I put this all on the Twitter thread at Dennis Kelleher today to detail how inaccurate Gary was about Madoff.
Hey,
But
hey,
the,
John. Hey, John. I just want to touch. I want to say one thing because there were fines. So when
Please.
traders like you guys and everyone out there get upset about high frequency traders and payment for order flow, and Dennis will remember this, and so will Dave. Like it was 2010, 11 that we were sitting on institutional trading desks, right, as hedge funds, and we'd have these salesmen come to us from Credit Suisse, Citigroup, Barclays, and say, "Hey, Danny, how would you like to trade for free?" Well, anytime anyone says that to me, I'm like, "Okay, well, what are you getting out of it?"
Right.
And I quickly found out they were taking our orders, sticking them in the dark pools, which I know we talked about, but we didn't, different thing. And what happened? Schneiderman, you remember the Attorney General?
Sure.
Look at the fines. Barclays, Credit Suisse, right? That was when this whole thing started.
Yep.
And so on the institutional side, when people want to go after, Wall Street, just everyone remember that the Wall Street traders can be allies with everybody because this has been going on a long time. They were taking our orders and they had prop trading funds set up to go against our orders and high frequency traders to go against our orders. I mean, we talked about that in Flash Boys, but this has been endemic. This has been going on a very long time. It just comes out in different forms, and I'm glad everyone's getting upset about it.
And every one of those brokers still operates a dark pool. It doesn't matter how much they were fined. They get to keep operating these.
I'm gonna switch it up now because I want to get into. We have a guest that she was a guest of our show on a different topic, but she's one of our favorites. She's Joan Donovan. She is the research director over at the Shorenstein Center, Media Politics and Public Policy. She talks a lot about these, and I'm going to see if I can get Joan on here. And I don't.
I'm here.
Oh, hey, Joan, nice to see you.
You
Thanks for
can't
being
fool
on.
me. I know how this technology works.
Joan, you're way ahead of me because I don't.
It's all good.
What I was trying to bring up to Gary Gensler was this idea of the power of the crowd pointed in the right direction. That crowdsourcing, that this Reddit movement has a chance to really be a positive corrective. And you had written a lot about Reddit movements and Occupy and those kinds of things. What's the future of that kind of element to help clean up these markets?
Well, there's two things happening here, which is one is the short term power of the crowd to destabilize institutions, right? One of the things that Robinhood did really well is it allowed the crowd to get organized and like a tactic, almost like a weapon, was
Mm-hmm.
able to be wielded by the crowd. But it's not anything an individual could do, right? You had to really have all of these groups and people talking to each other and figuring out how to coordinate. And then, the use of that app was, it was quickly, that vector of attack was quickly shut down.
Right.
Right. And so the crowd can always act in the short term in high volumes if they can be coordinated. But in the long term, one of the questions that I really want to hear from the panel here is really about, well, what's the institution you got to make to be able to replace or run in parallel to the kind of Wall Street inside game that none of us understand,
That
but
that's
has all of our
that's a great
pensions,
question. Let me ask
so they
Dave.
work the crowd too, but in a different way.
Right. Dave, let me ask you this, because the way I look at it is, you suddenly have this group with this power. It seems like the SEC almost has to deputize them to some extent to give them the credibility and the staying power. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I like I said on the episode, and I've been saying it for a while. I think this group, this movement is the difference, and it could make the difference if anything could, right? If anything
Right.
can change the system, it is millions of retail investors rising up, educating themselves, and being empowered to go to the regulators and say, "Look, we're on to you. We get it, and it's
Right.
not
But
fair, and we're not okay
these
with it."
institutions, though, are expert at tearing these populist movements apart. And in many ways, these populist movements are expert at tearing themselves apart.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you want to attack this, so even I'll just throw this out there, as a different thing. But like when we announced our panel guests, some of you guys took a ton of shit from
yeah.
the crowd on
They do.
Twitter.
Yeah,
I'll give you another example. We're going to do an AMA with the Wall Street Bets, right? But we wanted to do Wall Street Bets and the Super Stonks. We wanted to get everybody together and do it. But those groups have an animus to each other. And so there's a lot of political dynamics amongst these populist groups that weaken their efforts.
oh, there's a
And
huge amount of
don't think that these
negativity.
institutions don't know how to exploit those divisions as
Yep.
they were able to do in other movements.
Hey,
Oh,
John.
no doubt. They're doing it. They're doing it all the time. They're instigating. They're getting people to hate each other, to attack each other, because they know that as long as you're doing that, you're not attacking them and you're not focusing on them. And again, so what we're trying to do with our We the Investors movement is to change that and to focus on very specific issues and to let people advocate for themselves, not to give them someone to represent them, but rather let them represent themselves and see if we can do this from the grassroots rather than trying to organize, which always ends up with people fighting each other.
And John, here's the thing. Here's the thing about it is that slowly but surely, everything has its growing pains, and we've experienced them.
Right.
Reddit has experienced them. YouTube has experienced them. Twitter has experienced them. But this is the tide changing. Like I always love to say this thing: share, learn, and connect. It doesn't matter if you like each other, but we get there shoulder to shoulder, because the foundation of all of this is that you don't want to be told what to do, and then it affects your money. So that crosses all of the lines. So these growing pains are slowly starting to dissipate. And the hands across the aisle that we wish our congressmen would do is that we're doing it together. And the thing about it is that over a period of time, those bonds will heal. And like I said, it's like a big circle. If I miss the connection with you the first time, when that circle comes around, we'll make a connection, because organic connection is what holds this thing together.
That's right.
Making people choose sides is not a good revolution. So we're getting there, and we will make it there with stuff like better markets, with stuff like we the investor, with different things and different people that we have in this thing to galvanize behind what we're doing as a whole. Because here's the one truism: we've been here for a year. And we've gone through the fatigue, but then we also starting to realize that Dave and Dennis and Danny and all these other people and Lisa and the rest of them have been fighting this fight from a cocktail party where they're in the corner of the room being laughed at. Well, guess what? They're not being laughed at anymore because they came with
That's right.
backup. So
And let me give you a specific example. Let me draw an example here. You know, on Reddit, you have Super Stonk, and on Super Stonk, you had this giant movement for people to directly register their shares. And this is such an interesting concept. It's sort of how it used to be. Most people used to directly own shares in companies, right? And it facilitates this relationship between the investor and the company that is disintermediated. And it makes it so that you get control. So if you want to lend out your shares, you can, but you have control over that. And Superstonk was able to mobilize and register a very material percentage of the float of GameStop, and they continue to do it, and they continue to pull these shares out of the market. So yes, grassroots movements can be co-opted, they can have wedges driven in, but you know, this new era of technology lets people communicate in such a unique and fast way and share so much information and move so quickly,
and I
that
love
it
that
could
idea.
be a difference maker.
I love that idea because so much of what's done of these phantoms and synthetics and doctor shopping brokers so that you can short 20% here, 20% there, 20% there, and suddenly end up with a
Right.
200% short position on a synthetic that doesn't make any fucking sense to begin
Exactly.
with. So I love ideas like that, you know, but it also talks about I want to get into on the corporate side very quickly. We've got Dan Price, who everybody probably knows, CEO of Gravity Payments, who famously raised all of his employees' wages. You know, the one thing we haven't talked about, and we're talking a lot about institutional investors versus retail investors, but I want to talk a little bit about monetary policy and fiscal policy and the corporate side of it. First of all, the Fed is inflating the shit out of the market by turning its money cannon on, you know, keeping interest rates low and making sure that they're backstopping. I don't know how many, what their bond buy is every month, but it's probably $120 million or so, or $120 billion every month. We're seeing inflation now, but inflation can also be a product of companies taking advantage of a crisis rather than lifting wages. They just, you know, anytime the money goes into the people's hands, inflation spikes. But when it goes into the asset bubble, it doesn't. So I want to talk to, is Dan on here?
Yeah, John, didn't you hear that the asset that inflated the most was actually yachts at 74%? And I heard it was all the fast food workers that got the $2 or $3 an hour raise. They put a run on the yachts. So, you know, that's our main problem.
I keep seeing the Burger King yacht go by. And it
Yeah, that's why it's such an issue. But you're right, John. And I think one of the things I love about your show, and you've always been doing this, I know a number of your writers, is pushing back against those media narratives. And I listened to your podcast on inflation, and I thought your guests and you just got it completely spot on. And, you know, I experienced the power of this kind of narrative shift firsthand because when I, you know, realized I was doing it, frankly, wrong in 2015 by paying myself $1 million and my, you know, clerks and people answering the phones $35,000 a year. When I cut my pay and made my minimum wage $70,000 a year and lowered my pay to that same amount, you know, Fox News came out and said that I was going to fail, that I was a socialist. Rush Limbaugh said I would be a case study in MBA programs about how to destroy a business. And, you know, the truth has been exactly the opposite. You know, we've tripled in size. Our employees are so much better off. They're having babies, buying homes, and just having general freedom. And yet one of the top Google searches right now, if you Google my company, Gravity Payments, is if we're bankrupt, because that media narrative that you're pushing back against is so powerful. And you're right, we're pointing money cannons at the rich, but then we're also pointing insults and negative narratives at the poor, the working class, the people actually creating the value.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I think it's nice. It's a nice place to end because we've sort of, you know, we're at both polarities. We were going to the moon, and then we got a guy with a company named Gravity. So you can see the thermodynamics at play and the various things. I do want to thank everybody for taking a part here. Remember, you can watch. We got a Wall Street episode just came out on Apple TV Plus. We're going to do an AMA on Monday. I want to thank Dave and Danny and Dennis and Joan and Jay and everybody else who joined with us. This conversation doesn't end here. And we've all got to make sure that the one thing I've learned in all this time is they are banking on you losing your stamina, and they are banking on you losing your tenacity. And the fact that the strength is in your community and it's so strong and it's evolving is the worst thing that could happen to them. So I'm delighted to get a chance to talk to you guys. I have great admiration for all the things that you're all trying to do to create better and fairer markets for people. Really, really terrific job. You can also write to us at The Problem. We'll listen. I don't know if we'll write back because, we also were very busy and very popular. So, but thanks again, guys, for joining in. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to see you guys soon and talk to you guys again real soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks for bringing attention to this. It's been an honor to be a part of this with you.
Yes,
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, John. And I'll hold that hug for you, brother.
Thank you.
See
Bye-bye.
y'all on
Thank
the
you.
internet.
See you on the internet. Bye-bye.